I want you to imagine you're a physician. Now, this is going to be easier for some of you than others. Because I know there's some physicians, there's some non-physicians here. But imagine you're a physician running your own practice. I want you to think about the end of one of those really long days. You've seen patients back to back. The charting's still not done. You had 0 time for lunch. Time cards have to be approved, and there's an insurance company that left 2 voicemails that have said, you need to get back to them ASAP. But what really weighs on you isn't all of those tasks. It's that you're carrying that burden alone. Your family, your friends, even your staff, they care about you and they care about your practice, but they don't know what it's like to be in your shoes. They don't live your life. They don't know what it takes to carry that responsibility, that weight. And so you carry it yourself, and you push on, and you keep it inside, and you get more and more professionally isolated. Isolation is one of the biggest causes of burnout in physicians. A recent study showed that physicians who said they were burned out were 3 times as likely to also say they were intensely lonely. And loneliness is a key issue in many of the Colorado Medical Society and the other medical societies here. They have tons of resources online and in person to help address loneliness. Loneliness isn't just uncomfortable. It actually makes your health worse. It leads to chronic disease, can lead to depression and suicide. And at work, it makes you less effective. It's harder to make decisions, you're not as efficient. And eventually, it isn't just a personal cost, it starts to weigh on your patients. And by patients, I mean the patients you see, not your other patients. So you're probably wondering, who's this guy that talks about networking that's standing up here, and why is he talking to me about loneliness? So as Ginny said, I have been coaching people for over 12 years in groups, one-on-one. I wrote a book about connecting and networking. I write a weekly newsletter called The Introverted Networker. And I help people figure out a way to grow their professional connections, grow their circle of trusted peers. And so for some of you, this might be relevant because at some point you're going to want to advance in your career. And so connecting with people is the way you meet people who can help you advance in your career. And others, maybe you're trying to grow a business, and so it's helpful to find new clients through networking. But we're talking about physicians who are feeling isolated, feeling alone. And how can we use these ideas of connecting in order to help address that isolation? And so as Ginny said, I'm not just somebody who talks about networking. I've worked as an employee for DaVita, for Envision Healthcare, for Optum, one of the largest employers of physicians in the US. And while I'm not a physician, I've worked alongside thousands of them. And I've seen how difficult it is to be a physician in a very complex healthcare system. I've also seen how much it helps physicians to have a circle of peers that know what it's like to be them and what they're going through. Somebody they can talk to, somebody they can commiserate with, sometimes just vent to. I'm not the only person who talks about, well, before we get into that, let's talk about networking. Okay, so when you think of networking, and you should be thinking of networking top of mind because you just came in from a networking event. So is this what you normally think of when you think of networking? Is an event like this where you're talking to maybe people you know, maybe meeting some new people, shaking hands, making some small talk, maybe it's a little awkward sometimes. Is that what you normally think of when you think about networking? Because that's the common thing that most people think of. It's something like that you just walked in from. And the problem with that is that many of you are thinking to yourselves, that was great, it was part of the conference, but if I told you to go out and do more networking, you'd probably say, I don't have time, I don't really like to, I already know a lot of people. It doesn't really help me run my practice, run my business. So you don't do it, and you think of networking as optional, awkward, something that's not at the top of your priority list. Here's the problem. That belief, that idea of what networking is what keeps you trapped in professional isolation. So what if we've had networking all wrong? What if networking isn't an event like this? What if networking isn't trying to be somebody you're not? In its truest form, networking is really about a group of people that are in mutually beneficial relationships to help each other out. That's really what a network is. That's what a network is, but the networking, how you get that, is the part that people don't like. And I'm talking about it in terms of addressing professional isolation. I'm not the only person who talks about this as it relates to physicians. Dr. Mark Greenwald is a professor and vice chair of family and community medicine at the Virginia Tech School, Carilion School of Medicine. And he tells a story about a physician who says to him, my days are insane. Lately, I still love my job, but lately it feels like a grind. It doesn't feel like a privilege to be a physician. And I don't know how long I can keep this up. Have any of you had those thoughts or said something like that in the last year? Raise your hand. Okay, maybe like the last month, last week. This is not a common sentiment, right? This is not this is not uncommon sentiment. This is very common to feel this way, especially as a physician. And so what Dr. Greenwald did is, instead of just talking about burnout or isolation, he put together a program called Peer RX Med. And what he did is he paired up 30 physicians with connection partners. And he made them promise to get in touch with each other once a week. Even if it was for 90 seconds to send a text or an email, they had to reach out to each other every week. And they had to have a longer conversation once a month on the phone or in person. As these 30 physicians did this with their partners, he was measuring their well-being. He had a survey that tracked their well-being, and what he found was at the end of a few months, their well-being had increased. And they started using words like uplifting, reviving, decompressing to describe this experience. I don't know Dr. Greenwald, I've never met him. I don't know anything about his program. I'm not affiliated, other than I found this program when I was preparing for this presentation. And I want to highlight it because, number one, it shows that connecting with a peer and talking to a peer, even for a small amount of time, can help your well-being. The second thing is, it doesn't have to take a lot of time. It just has to be intentional. And that's what this program showed. If you're interested in that program, you can look it up online and see what Dr. Greenwald's doing. But what I want to talk to you about today is that intentionality. The intentionality of connecting with your peers to build that circle of trusted people who you can rely on when things get hard and you feel isolated. And so I call it the connection loop. And what we handed out was a one-page illustration of the connection loop. And I am going to walk us through this, and I'm going to tell you how to use this and how to create this. And you're going to walk away with this plan that you can use either in the rest of this conference, or you can go back to your home this week, back to your office, and you can work through the steps of the connection loop so that you can connect with people outside of an event like this. You don't have to go to one of these events. You don't have to wait for the next conference to start to grow your network. You can do this on your schedule, in your space, whether you want to do it online or in person, and in your own style, whether you want to be really outgoing about this or really introverted. So I'm going to walk you through this now. And there's 5 steps to the connection loop. So the 5 steps are listed. There's 4 boxes, and there's one underneath them. I'm going to walk you through this. And this is something that I talk to people about. Again, any type of networking, any type of connecting, this is my approach to this, but it also works for growing this circle of peers. So step 1, this is where we start. I always tell people, when you're connecting with people, start with who you know. Start with who you already know. Now, most people, when I say that, their response is, but Greg, I already know them. Why would I start with them? I'm trying to meet new people. Fair enough. But start with who you know is based on a study done at the MIT Sloan School of Management. And they had a group of executive MBA participants, students, people who were CEOs, executives at companies. And they got them together and they said, we want you to go through and make a list of the people who you know from your career, but you've lost touch with. And we just want you to come up with a list of what we call your dormant ties. These are people you have met either through school, coworkers, companies you've worked for, businesses you've interacted with, people you already know, but have lost touch with. And we just want you to make a list. Once you've made that list, we're going to ask you to reach out to these people. Just a simple message. But before we do that, we want you to predict how many people are going to respond. What percentage response rate are you going to get? And they thought 35, 40%. They thought 3 or 4 out of 10 people would respond. And then they asked them to send a simple message that was, hey, you crossed my mind the other day. We haven't talked in a long time. I would love to reconnect. And that was the message. That was it. It was a text or an email, however they could get in touch with them. What they found was instead of 3 or 4 out of 10 people responding, about 75 or 80% of people responded. So people got this message and they responded back and they said, so great to hear from you. Would love to get back in touch. Let's reconnect. And so that created this theory of dormant ties, which those people responded because when they got that email from that person that they already knew, they were like, I know this person. Let me get back in touch. I would love to talk to him or her. And so that is why I tell people to start with who you know, because most people are really uncomfortable reaching out to strangers. So let's reduce the risk of people not responding, because people who you already know are going to respond. They're going to say, yeah, I would love to talk to you. I would love to have a conversation. It's low risk, high response. And once you do that, you're going to have these people that you're going to reconnect with these people and rekindle these dormant ties. So that's step number 1. Now, on the sheet, I've left you some lines there, but you can go through, and what I would ask is that you write down and start thinking about people who you've worked with in the past, people who you know from your past, people who you've lost touch with that you'd like to get back in touch with. Okay, so that's what you do is you put the names of the dormant ties on the first box there, upper left-hand corner. Start with who you know. Okay? Once we do that, and we have our list of dormant ties, we're going to connect online, but we're going to work to build relationships in real life, IRL, in real life. You've got your list of dormant ties, and just like in the study, you're going to reach out to those people any way you can. If it's text, if it's email, maybe you're connected with them on a social media platform, and you're going to use that real simple message. You're going to say, hey, you crossed my mind the other day, which is true because you wrote them down on a piece of paper, you thought of them, and you're going to just say, hey, it's been a really long time since we talked. I would love to get back in touch. Let's reconnect. Many people, when I tell them this, say things like, I haven't talked to this person in 10 years. Are they really going to respond? can say almost 100% confidence, yes, they are going to respond. And the way I tell people to think about this is to put yourself in the other person's shoes. If you got a message from somebody you had worked with 10 years ago and you hadn't talked to them, and they sent it to you and said, hey, I would love to reconnect, would you respond? Probably. I mean, unless you have some sort of issue with that person or you didn't really like that person, but we're hoping that your dormant ties are people you actually want to get back in touch with and who would be excited to hear from you. So that's what you're going to do in the next stage is take the top person, your top dormant tie, and you're going to send them that message, and then you're going to wait for them to respond. A note about waiting to respond. Everybody's busy. This is not going to be at the top of their priority list. They may take a little bit of time to get back to you. It's okay. Don't worry about it. They're going to respond and they're going to say, hey, great to hear from you. I would love to talk to you. Let's get together or let's talk. So that's the first part of this. But then you're trying to move to the next part, which your goal here is to get to a place where you're going to have a voice-to-voice conversation. Okay, so the key here is we can send emails and texts back and forth, but we all know that only about 7% of meaning goes through text-based conversations. You lose lots of context, you lose emotion, you lose a lot of what's going on with the person if you're not talking to them in real life. Ideally, you're talking to them face-to-face in person, but we understand geography sometimes doesn't allow that. Sometimes schedules don't allow that. So I always say, you're trying to get to a place where you are having a phone or a video conversation with them. But you need to have a voice-to-voice conversation. So, you've made your list of dormant ties, you've picked one person. The next step of the loop is to reach out to them with that very simple message, which I've put there on the piece of paper. You can use that message, or you can tailor it yourself. I would encourage you to not make it really long, don't make it really involved, just real simple. Would love to get back in touch with you. And then once that person responds, you're trying to say, okay, well let's have a phone call. Let's talk for 15 minutes on the phone. Let's get on a video call. Let's do Zoom. Let's do Teams. Whatever it is you use. And now you're moving into the next part of the loop, which is listen and give. Okay, so this is actually step 3 in the connection loop, but it's listen and give. So you've set up this time with this person. You've reconnected with them, and you're now going to get into this conversation. Now, you may approach this and have no issues with trying to get to talk to them. You may have no issues breaking the ice. But a lot of people, especially if you're more introverted, they will say to me, I don't know what we're going to talk about. I don't know what to say. What am I supposed to do in this conversation? My response is always, when you get in one of these conversations, your job is to always ask the other person about their favorite topic. People will say, well, what's their favorite topic? I said, well, it's the same thing for everybody. Everybody has the same favorite topic. It's the topic that they know the most about. It's themselves. Ask them what they're excited about this month. Ask them what they achieved last month. Ask them what challenges they're facing. Ask them good, deep questions that they can respond and start to tell you about themselves. And when they do that, your job is to shut up and listen. Your job is not to tell them about what you're doing. We'll get to that. But your job is to listen to what they're saying. And the key with the listening is then, once you start listening, they're going to say things like, I'm really struggling with this issue. I'm really struggling with this problem. I've got this going on in my life. And you're going to be thinking, because you're listening, about how can I give this person something in this conversation. And so there's an acronym to help you think about what you could give to this other person. And I call it, you want to give AIR. AIR stands for advice, introductions, or recommendations. You want to listen to what they're struggling with, listen to what's going on in their life, listen to what they can use help on, and give them advice. Maybe it's a problem you've already solved. Or maybe you think this person really needs to meet somebody that I know. And you're going to give them that introduction. Or you're going to think, I just read a book this person could really use. Or I listened to a podcast. Or I read an article. And you're going to give them a recommendation to go check that out. It doesn't have to be big. You're not trying to find this person a new job. You're trying to give them something in this conversation. The reason why we're doing this is because many times people in these conversations feel really awkward because they say, I don't want to ask the other person for something. I don't want to pitch myself. I don't want to go in and say, this is what I need. And so I always say, listen and give makes it so it's not awkward for you. When you listen to people and you let them talk about themselves, the area of their brains that controls their dopamine release lights up. They get a dopamine release from talking about themselves. What does dopamine do? It makes us feel good. With whatever it is we're doing at that moment, we feel good about it. And it makes us want to talk, do more. So we're going to talk more about ourselves. We're feeling good. The person listening, they gave us something. Even if we're not thinking about it as a gift, we naturally, all of a sudden, want to reciprocate. So again, to set this up, you have set up this conversation, you got into this conversation with this person you know, you've listened, you're giving to them. They are going to say to you, this has been great. How can I help you? So now you haven't even had to ask for help. The other person is going to say, how can I help you? This is the really important part of this because in this step 4, you have to be easy to help. What does it mean to be easy to help? Well, I usually tell people the way to be easy. I demonstrate be easy to help by saying what it looks like to be hard to help. So let's take this out of sort of the medical realm for a second. When people are looking for jobs, oftentimes they will meet with a connection and they will say, here's my resume, can you hand that to somebody? That is being very hard to help. So when I talk to people who are looking for a job, I say, don't give them your resume, give them a target company list. A list of companies you're interested in working at and that you would love to learn more about. Give them that and then say, do you know anybody who works at one of those companies? And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. But the point is to get introduced to a new person in that scenario. When I talk to people who are growing their businesses, I don't necessarily say give them a target company list. I say you have to tell people what your ideal customer says so that that person will know they are your ideal customer. What I mean by that is if I teach people about networking, that's one thing. Also, I run another business where I do what we call total rewards consulting, so employee compensation and benefits. That was my HR career for 20 plus years. That's what I did for Optum, that's what I did for DaVita, that's all the stuff I did. So now I have my own consulting company, and when I tell people what my ideal customer says, I say, if you hear somebody who's a leader at a company that says, we're not sure if we're paying people competitively, or people are quitting and we don't know if it's our compensation and benefits, or we have people who seem to be leaving, they're not engaged, they're not connected to the organization. If you hear somebody say that, you know to connect them to Greg. Send them to Greg because that's exactly what I do. So you have to get very specific about what it is you're looking for from your connection. Now in this scenario, it's going to be more like, who do you want to meet as a physician? Do you want to meet physicians in your specialty? Do you want to meet physicians in other specialty? Who do you want to get connected with? Who do you want to know? Who do you want to have in this circle of trusted peers that you are trying to build? And you need to tell that person, I want to meet somebody like this. So that they can go out into the world, and they might have a name off the top of their head. And if they have the name off the top of their head, great. They're going to introduce you to them. And that goes all the way back around the connection loop to the very beginning. We go back to They're not necessarily dormantized, but that's the start where we do the loop again. And that's how you grow your network. You didn't go to an event. You didn't have to outreach to a stranger. You started with who you knew, but that person is going to introduce you to somebody new, and that's how your network grows. Now, the fifth step of this is the most important, because you have to create a habit of doing this. If you write down a few names on this list and you do this loop a few times, yes, you will probably meet some new people. But if you don't make this a habit, your network's not going to grow, and you're not going to get to the place where you have the circle of trusted peers. So this has to become a habit. And how do you make it a habit? Well, I tend to follow the idea of tiny habits, Dr. B.J. Fogg, which is about making any action you want to make a habit smaller. And there's other research, James Clear, Atomic Habits is another approach to this, exactly the same thing. Make whatever it is you want to make a habit smaller. So instead of saying I'm going to send 10 networking messages, I'm going to send one. Do one a week. And then see where that message goes. And maybe you have one conversation a week. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. You're trying to create a habit by making these actions doable so that you will do them, you will follow this plan, and you will start to connect and have conversations with people that form these relationships that are going to address this professional isolation you may be feeling. So just to kind of go back to, and you've got the thing in front of you, so I don't need to go through each one of these steps, but this is the connection loop. This is how you network without going to networking events. Like I said, you can do this anytime. It's on your schedule. You can talk to as many people or as few people as you want to. What's really important is the last piece, that is intentional and it becomes a habit. Now, I'm hoping that in a month from now, some of you have made your list and you've gone through and you've made some of these connections, you've had some of these conversations, and you've started to develop some new relationships with physicians or other professionals that can be your circle of trusted peers. That when you have that really hard day, you can reach out to them and maybe talk to somebody just for a few minutes and start to feel revived or uplifted or even decompressing. To go back to Dr. Mark Greenwald, he had 30 physicians that promised to do this, and they did it, and it improved their well-being. And what was the most important of that was that it was intentional and it didn't take a lot of time. I want you guys to promise yourself that you're going to take one person on your list after you make your list of dormantized, and you're going to complete the connection loop with them. And see how it goes, see how you do. Yeah. I know there's some other dinners going on, there's some other activities going on tonight, so I'm not going to do a bunch of Q&A right here, but I'm going to be around for the rest of this evening. I'll be here tomorrow morning at some of the early sessions, probably in between the sessions, because I looked at the sessions on the agenda and I'm not going to have the first idea about what you're talking about. So I will be here in the morning tomorrow. So if you have questions about this, please feel free and come up and talk to me. On the back of that sheet is a QR code that links to a page that tells you more about me. If you want to get in touch with me, you just scan that and it takes you to a page. You can connect with me through that page if you want to learn more about what I do or what I can do for organizations. I hope that I've shown you that networking is not about events. Networking is about connection. Networking is about conversation. Networking starts with just one person, and that one person is you.